Hello, BookTube. I thought I'd come to you with a book-related video. It's been a while. I've been under the weather, but I'm starting to feel a little bit better. And I've been watching a little bit of BookTube, seeing a few videos. Specifically, Steve Donahue has done a live regarding book purchasing, and it was very interesting to hear the viewers that were watching the live, their sort of experiences, if any, change over the last while of book purchasing. And he also did a 10 tips for buying from eBay. And it was interesting, good tips. I will try to link both videos below. But I thought rather than coming to you with a video of horror stories of purchasing online, I thought I would come to you with a video of sort of a guide, in a sense, of book purchasing, used books mainly online. And I will preface it first of all by a little bit of sort of general things to keep in mind for any type of purchasing online, but more specifically books. And I will list a number of places to purchase used books. Many of you may know all of them, but maybe there will be a few new places as well for you, or places you've never thought of. I will touch on new books as well, but for the most part, this will be used books. And by no means is this going to be an exhaustive list of what is available on the internet. And things do change very quickly on the internet, and I will be talking mostly with regards to ones that are tried and true, that have been around for a while. Now, the general things to remember when purchasing online is, well, first of all, I guess, is ask yourself, do you want a book that is, a book that's in good shape? Does that matter to you? Or you just need a reading copy? Now, obviously, a reading copy is going to be, you want something that is just cheap and that is readable. And so, most of what I'm going to say here with regards to uh, how to sort of choose something and the pitfalls that you could run into won't really matter too much, because you're just thinking specifically of cheap, readable. That's it, and that's perfectly fine. I've even purchased some as well that way. Just you just want a reading copy. However, there's a few of us who are more on the collector side, and not in the way of collectors, which seems to be what people seem to think. Oh, I'm not a collector because I don't buy something that's worth money. You don't need to be buying something to that's worth money to be a collector. If you have more than a few books and you buy books and you keep a lot of them, you are a collector. And it just because you like something maybe good condition, you're still collector, or even bad condition, you're still a collector. But anyway, that's another whole discussion there. But anytime that now it's very easy to have photographs of books, but you need to be a little careful, as Steve mentioned, to make sure that it is photographs of the book that you are purchasing. Now, a lot of times they use a stock photo, and it's just the outline, or just perfect picture of the cover. That generally will mean that it's not the book that you're buying. It's a stock photo that they've uploaded. And here's the key to this when I say uploaded, because there was, in some places they'll say seller's photos. Now, that means generally that they have uploaded that picture. It doesn't mean that's the photo of the book that you're purchasing. It just means that they've uploaded. So they could have taken, and even when there's multiple pictures as well, they will sometimes take these pictures from someone else and put them up as their own. Now, that is hard to tell unless you have a bookseller who, in their description, will say this is photo. These are photos of the books for sale. or in their seller description page that will say something similar. If it doesn't say that, then you need to ask if it is something that concerns you. And they will either come back to say yes or no, or they will not reply to you. And if they don't reply to you, then it probably means that it's not, or that they're not a very good bookseller because they're not very good at the basic customer service. So again, it's a question of, okay, do you want to take the chance? Is it good enough price to warrant the possibility of something? And you need to then cover yourself a little bit, because depending on where you're buying it from, take screenshots of the description and everything, because sometimes that disappears once it gets purchased, so you have no recourse back on it. And then take photos. If the book comes and the packaging is very poor, take photos before you open it, take photos after you open it, and all this kind of thing to sort of back to if you need to make a claim with the seller or the provider where they were listing on. And always ask questions. If something is not, like, description wise, or they mention some damage but it's not shown, and it's unclear what extent the damage is to the book, ask for a more detailed photo. Now, not all booksellers will have photos of their material. The ones on eBay, generally you do have photos for 99.9%. But there are the old school booksellers who never had it. They would just describe everything. And they still do that on their own website or on some other databases where they list. Now, most now have a smartphone, so you can always ask for quick photos. And again, if they are legitimate and they are half decent in their customer service, you'll get a photo back. And it's just all in doubt. When in doubt, ask. It's as simple as that. And if you don't get an answer, as I say, then you make the decision and think that, well, it's probably not. It's too good to be true, and it probably is. So those are sort of general things to think about. A lot of people say look at the ratings of the seller. Well, it doesn't really, because if they're selling just bottom denominator stuff, really cheap reading copies, it's not going to help you for the description and stuff like that, because people are going to be happy. They got a cheap book to read. Perfectly fine, but it may not be what you're looking for. So don't always carte blanche, like just accept everything on the ratings. One thing that I do want to say, like Steve mentioned, with regards to how long the listing has been there, that is a good point, and I want to sort of have addition to that. He was saying that there could be a reason for that. Well, yeah, because it may not be a popular book. So if you do see something that you may have seen that's popped up for year after year, and I've seen this while you're searching for stuff, and it's a bit of a high price and it hasn't sold, it's always, sometimes there's a make an offer button, so you make an offer. But if there isn't, and that this listing has been around for a long time, send a message to the seller and say, I'm interested in this book, but I'm willing to pay you X for it, or what's the best price you can give me for this? Sometimes you'll get back a really good deal because they have had it for a long time, and they just figure, okay, well, there's somebody's interested, I'll cut the price and sell it, get rid of it. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the book. It just means that they had it probably a little too high priced, and it may not be that popular of a title. So those are kind of things to look at, and that can be very beneficial to the buyer. So let's go into places to buy. Well, you've got eBay, as we were talking about here, and as Steve did his 10 top tips. Um, it's been around for a long time. Everybody knows it's a both a auction site, and you can buy now, and you can filter things as well. One thing you need to be concerned about, not concerned about, but be wary of when you filter in any of these places. A lot of the filters only work as well as the information that the bookseller has put on. If it's price wise, well, obviously they had to put a price up there so it can order prices, or whether it's an auction or buy it now. However, things like hardcover, signed edition, things like that are a little iffy because the filter may not work correctly for those. Because I don't know how many times you've looked for something, you see all these paperback, and then you see a couple of hardcovers. Then you go into the filter for hardcover, and it says there's 0. Well, that's absolutely incorrect. Because, and the reason why that is because, well, I'm assuming a big part of this is that the person who has put the listing up hasn't entered the information correctly in the right places, so the filter will work. So at times like that, you need to, those are subjective things that you need to then sometimes trudge through all this other stuff to find. And the same as condition wise and everything too. These are kind of things that are iffy for filtering at times. So just be wary of these type of things. Now, before I move on from eBay as an auction site, I will talk about there are many other auction sites that have started and ended. I didn't do a search to see what's current now, but there are other places that do this kind of thing. And there's also other places. I'll start. Then I'll do a little section here on sort of the lesser known places that you can look. Facebook has a marketplace. It has a general marketplace, but it also has a lot of marketplaces for local areas. Now, they'll be selling everything from diapers to furniture, washing machines, computers, but books as well. And not always selling. Sometimes there's a lot of free items on here because people just want to get rid of it. They don't want to throw it out. They just want somebody to have it. And I've gotten a lot of books that way. Because it's not a place that is well trotted for looking for books. And it does take a lot of work, but you can occasionally find something that's good. There's places like Etsy. That is sort of, it's not the greatest, I don't think, because it's a place where it's a lot of esoteric stuff is on there for items, people who craft things and maybe, self-publish as well for book-wise. But also there's this aesthetic of an old book. It's an antique book. And I'm using antique as the term. And they think that it's furniture, and sometimes they'll price it high. But occasionally you can get good deals on there. So it's worth looking at. And there's other places that do very, very similar things. As I say, over the last 10 years or so, I've seen many that have started and have disappeared. So it is something worth looking at. There's also bulletin boards. There are places that even less trodden now, but they were really popular in the early 80s, were the bulletin boards, the news groups. Where people were selling stuff, and that's where I sort of began. So I've had a long period of over 40 years of buying and selling books on the internet in quotation marks, because way before the internet sort of got off to what it was, and the backbone of the internet was the news groups, and they're still there, they're still active. You will need to see how you can access them by a provider that's for news groups, or your internet provider will have access to them. But anyway, that's something that's a completely separate thing, but it's still something that's worth looking into. There are other places. There are a lot of local places and other sites that you can buy items for, used items, and there's national ones, there's international ones, and sometimes they have books, DVDs, Blu-rays, cars even, and but again, it's the time and the searching for things. But sometimes you can hit gold in respect to things, because you can find things that people just want to get rid of, and they haven't checked everywhere else for prices. That's usually doesn't happen very often, but it can happen still. Um, so yeah, so you got all these other little places here, but then you've got dedicated book selling sites, databases, where as a bookseller you can add your books, and the biggest one is ABE Books, Advanced Book Exchange, ABE, and it started originally in Canada, in Vancouver. It has been bought out by Amazon, and it's not as good as it used to be. But when I started selling books, I started selling on there, and I think there was only a couple hundred booksellers. I don't know how many tens of thousands there are on there now. And there's biblio.co.uk, there's biblio.com. I think there's Abe. Biblio is a different site. abe.co.uk, abe.com, abe.ca. So they're sort of geared to certain countries as well. Now, again, all these things that I said at the beginning are relevant. What you're searching for, and pictures, like on there, it'll say, seller's photos or something to that effect. But that really just means that they've uploaded the picture. It doesn't mean it's the picture of the book that you're buying. So that's where you need to clarify somehow in the description, or their seller description, or asking. And not all of them will have photos on there, because they are the old school that will describe things not in the sense of new as new or good, and that's usually a generic terms, which aren't that helpful to somebody who is concerned about the condition. So you need to ask for details when they use those terms. Usually you will see the seasoned booksellers will use things like fine, near fine, very good plus, good, poor, reading copy, and those types of things. Now, it's always good, and most of these sites like Abe will have a little glossary to give you general terms for what these are, but also too, you need to look at what the bookseller is saying that it is. Like, if it's a fine copy, why is it a fine copy? If it's a very good copy, why is it very good? Why is it not a poor copy? Why is it not a perfect copy? And it'll describe the condition. And again, if you're not clear, and if you're not understanding it, ask for photos or ask for more information. It's as simple as that. Now, Abe is just one of those. I mentioned Biblio. Biblio is another one. There was a whole bunch that started in the early 90s. Some of them were bought up by other places, like Alibris gobbled up a whole bunch of places. Alibris is another one. It's a place where people sell books, booksellers, and sometimes they're on all these different venues as well. And instead of checking each one, there is a meta search engine that is really good. But again, it's downgraded a little bit over time because it's now owned by Amazon, and it's called Bookfinder.com. Just as simple as that, Bookfinder.com. Now, you'll get to a search sort of little square, rectangle, and at the bottom of the rectangle, just before the bottom, it'll say something, classic search display. Click on that, and then you'll have a little tick box where it'll say, search the classic search display. And I say do that because it'll then list every place. Like, it'll be ebay.co.uk, ebay.com, Waterstones, Barnes & Noble, Abe, biblio.co.uk, biblio.com, Alibris, it will go on and on and on and on and on. It'll search millions and millions and millions of listings throughout the world and all these things. And it'll list them all. Within each one, it'll probably list them by lowest to highest price. But you see the description there, and you'll see the seller, where they're located: United States, United Kingdom, Germany, wherever, and then a little link at the end to take you to that seller's listing. Or put it. It depends on a few of some of them put it directly into your into your basket on that site. So you need to look at that. But then it's also useful, as I say, to comparative shop, but also to see the same seller on different sites, and sometimes different prices. There's a lot of reasons why there'd be different prices. There's because some databases that you list on will charge more, so they pass that on to the buyer, or that they have a fixed. Doesn't happen as much now, but they will have. Some used to have fixed shipping rates, so therefore they increase the price of the book to cover the extra shipping. So again, passing it on to the buyer. Or you'll find the same description but different names. And then when you actually look at these, and if they have pictures, you'll see the same pictures. Excuse me. It is the same seller, but trading and selling under different names on different venues. And I know several that do this. I know the ones that sell on eBay is one, Abe as another, and then on biblio.co.uk as another seller. And they have different prices for each. It's the same book, but it's different prices. Sometimes they're vastly different. So you need to be a little careful of these kind of things. Just be a little savvy and think about things when you're looking. So yeah, that covers a large part of things. But there's also the booksellers who have been fed up with eBay, Amazon, Abe, and all these places. And there's still some that will not list on other databases. They have their own website. But even the ones that do list on the other websites will often have their own website. Now, it's all, if you do find stuff that you like from a seller that has a good book, it's always worth looking for their specific website if they have one. Because you may find that the prices are a little cheaper there, or that they will offer you a deal because they could do it easier off their website, because they don't have any the fees for Abe and all these other places. So it's possible to make little deals, or just it be offered a deal, by coming to their website. Like, obviously they can't on Abe say, or eBay, oh, come to my website and I'll give you 10% off. You may only find that out is when you buy the book from eBay or Abe, and you get a little letter or coupon that's in there that says, well, come to my website and use this code and it's 10% off, coming directly to my website. It's not all, they don't all do that, but that does happen quite often. So it's good to look for that kind of thing. But then, the question is, how do you find booksellers who don't list anywhere else that are listing there? Well, that's just time and effort, searching, or looking at, other bulletin boards that are on use books things, and you read what people talk about. Reddit is one thing, but that's a whole different thing. But there are places where you can occasionally find things where there's links to actual bookseller sites, and a lot of times they, as I say, they do not put anywhere else. And then there's still a few holdouts out there in the world that don't do any of this stuff. They still do a printed catalog. They are very, very few and far between. But it's just so nice to get a catalog in the post, coming through the door, and sit there and looking through the listings. It is so pleasurable to do that, because the really good bookseller is, you know, there's an art form to, in many ways, to describing the book and to do things, because they do extra work and things like that. They will reference other people who have talked about that book, or, you know, highlight the really interesting points of it that most, it goes over a lot of people's heads. So there's a bit of, with really good catalogs and really good listings, there's an education just in reading their descriptions, even if you don't buy. But anyway, that's a different matter. But yeah, so that's sort of a general overview of what you can find used book wise on the internet. And as I say, it's not exhaustive. There are places that come and go all the time. There's also your local, you know, when there are, you know, you use booksellers, but obviously this is, you know, buying online or buying from afar. You need to have either catalog or their website to go to. But, you know, if you do have local or can get to use booksellers, it's really great, because prices on the internet, it's done two things, the internet, with pricing. It's driven prices up on many things, and then it's driven prices down on many others. It's driven prices up because some people, like, you know, that somebody puts out £100 for a book, and then, you know, unless there's tens of thousands of copies of this book, the next person may put 95 on it, and then you may get 10 or 15, but you still got a high price. But you can walk in and that book is not worth any of those prices. It's because those people are just going by what's there, what's been listed. So that has increased the price for some things, and it's dropped prices for others. And a big problem that was getting, I think it's sometimes working out now. Now let me explain that. There were times that, as I said, there were millions or tens of millions of books listed on Bookfinder. There would be a huge percentage of those books don't exist anymore. They've either been sold, or people list books that they don't have because they can get it somewhere else, or they get somebody else to drop ship it. That is still an issue, I think. So prices, sometimes when you see a price, that book may not exist anymore. I don't know how often you've gone to go to buy a book and they say, oh, it's sold. But you wonder why they didn't take off their listing. And then you check months later and they still have that same book for sale for the same price. They don't take the listing down. Or there's an issue with the provider, the database that's doing this is not getting rid of these dead items. So these are all things you need to look at when you're researching of, you know, price of books, what you're willing to pay, condition, you know, all these things that you need to think about, or not. If you, as I said, if you just want a reading copy, the only thing you're thinking about is the cheapest price, obviously. You know, like I wanted a reading copy of for a book that is this month's Blackheart's book club, My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. I just wanted a reading copy, but I found one that was just over £2, I think, or maybe under, with shipping, that included shipping, and it said as new. So, yeah, that's no problem. Well, it's not as new. You can see it's cock spine. There's creases up and down the spine, and there's, I don't know what that is on the front page edge there. Some stains or something. You know, it's not, but it was still like within that price range. And then another one that I bought, that I wanted just a reading copy, and it was just over £2, I think, including the shipping. This has a few creases on the cover, but it's perfect in many ways because there's no crease on the spine. So, you know, that's a bonus, but it's a hit or miss, you know, when you deal with that kind of stuff. It depends on what you want, but obviously if you're spending a high amount of money for something, you want something that's in perfect condition, and you get next library, that's an issue. So you need to to address that with the seller, and if they don't rectify it, then with the provider that it's on. But yeah, so this is just a general sort of guide to buying online. And I will try to link the other videos down below because they are interesting if you're interested in that. I'm always interested in books, and I can talk forever about books, about buying books, and you know, issues that are surrounding it. But I tried to stray away from a lot of the horror stories buying online, and hopefully it will be a pleasurable experience for you. But also too, when you do find a bookseller that is bad, make a list of that. Either in your mind, make a list of the bad ones, but by far make a list of the good ones, so you can go back to, that you can trust. Thank you, BookTube.